Go back. Okay. You know, my goal is to understand why as well as what happened. We know what happened, but the why means you have to understand the context, the historical context of the rise of Nazism, the World Depression, the rise of fascism, the fact that the civil rights movement was really not in existence at that time in America. There was tremendous economic suffering. Capitalism seemed to be collapsing. This was the context in which all these people, like the Rosenbergs, were raised, and those historical facts led them to decide that there had to be a better way, and that's what I seek to understand in my writing. What motivated them, what caused them to behave as they did, and why they were unable to break from this kind of monolithic point of view. And I also interviewed the Spanish Civil War vets. I interviewed American communists who went to the Soviet Union and wound up in the Gulag and never saw their parents again. But always I try to understand the historical context of why. This leads them to, for example, one of the leading figures in the underground of the American Communist Party was J. Peters. The underground of the Communist Party was in the same headquarters as the overground of the Communist Party. They simply had different rooms. Earl Browder, the head of the Communist Party, in an adjacent room was J. Peters. J. Peters, to the end of his life, described himself as a civil rights activist. The self-righteousness of this mentality is truly mind-boggling. But they truly felt and even feel that they were doing the right thing. Morton Sobel only broke very recently, and he went through 50 years of denial. And I think felt he was doing correct thing politically.
Do you think it was correct?
Do I think it was correct? To further that myth? No. I think it was foolish and a waste of time and a waste of human energy. And also, how could it be a correct thing to deceive so many people who believed in you and who gave money, tons of money, to these causes?
By the way, what Sobel said about the prison where
he was at Alcatraz. What did he say about it? Well, he was like many American communists, brave. He had his ups and downs. He was in several prisons, and prison conditions gradually got better. But he had a rough time, like any other prisoner. The only thing is, he had the advantage of being a high-profile prisoner, and he had the multitudes of, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people concerned about him and shining a spotlight on his being in prison. And, of course, not only in prison, but an innocent, someone who was only trying to help mankind and trying to oppose the vicious fascist dictatorship of the United States. Yeah.
What was what did they write in press about the Soviet Union?
In the 60s?
Yeah, beginnings.
That is a complicated question, because many of these historians and even figures, you're talking about the New Left, aren't you? they would be critical of the Soviet Union. At the same time, they were rooting for the Viet Cong and for other forms of communist totalitarianism. They were, on the surface, they were not advocating Soviet Stalinism, but what they were advocating was any other form of communism that would ease their consciences about the brutalities of the Soviet Union. But their point of view always was that the United States was the number one enemy in the world. The United States and Israel were the imperialist forces in the world. And they tried to somehow adjust all this into a worldview that was never, I suppose, very coherent. They were, however, very brave in the civil rights movement, again, like their parents. And the problem with these people, what happened with the New Left, is the New Left became increasingly violent. They actually felt the American Communist Party was too tame, and they not really on the front lines. And they wanted a more violent, more militant form of communism. And so they mutated into Students for a Democratic Society, which mutated into the Weathermen and terrorism. And then, of course, we had a whole series of cases of terrorism. And many of those people who were in the vanguard are now considered saintly, according to the revisionist historians. So, it's a repeat of the same pattern in different forms. You cannot understand any of these movements by literally listening to them. You have to know what they're really saying, which is always that they're rooting for the other side, whether it's the Soviet Union or the Viet Cong or Pol Pot or China. It's always better. The grass is always greener.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
I think we can speak about it.